Good afternoon. I'm Michelle Bolus with NCInnovation. Really, really pleased to be here for so many reasons. I've been coming to this conference for a long time in various roles over the years, and this year really feels a lot like coming home. Just a couple of points before I turn to the panel and ask them to introduce themselves. But a special thanks to Tom, Rue, and the whole NCIDEA team, not only for having us here today, but for being incredible partners throughout NCInnovation's journey. We are a little over 2 years old, founded as a public-private partnership with $25 million in private funding and a $500 million endowment from the state of North Carolina to do this work in transitioning very, very early stage technologies from our universities across North Carolina, and I'll return to that point in a minute, to get them closer to a commercial opportunity. Our regional institutions are anchors in their various communities across the state, and the faculty in those institutions are really working on solving very applied problems. So they're working in their communities in areas around energy transition, ag tech, clean tech, looking at ways to transition manufacturing economy, utilizing digital tools into areas of advanced manufacturing. They're very, very important for their regions, and we want to make sure that the ideas and the technologies that are developed there are moved into economic benefit for those regions, that they're invented, they're grown, and they stay in North Carolina. And Tom and the NCIDEA team have been really critical partners all along that journey. They early on opened their network to us. They've been very generous with their time and their mentoring and advice, and now they're really critical partners in helping us to match our funded projects with entrepreneurs in residence, with mentors, and with all of the support that it takes to really make these companies succeed. But Tom is, one of many in the ecosystem community across North Carolina that has been so generous. Krista Covey with First Flight Ventures, Tom and Rachel from Riot, to the local venture and entrepreneurial support organizations. I see Heather McWhorter from Wilmington, the Venture Asheville crew. These are all partners that have come in and said, not how can we compete or how can we make sure that you're not competing, but how can we braid our resources together, leverage our networks, and take all that we have to make North Carolina really the innovation and entrepreneurship state. So very grateful for that, and am very eager to hear now from my colleagues on stage. As NCInnovation was really just getting started over a couple of years ago, we spent a lot of time looking with great jealousy and and interest at what our fellow states, our neighboring states were doing across the country, but more specifically in the Southeast. So really happy to be here with colleagues from Maryland and Virginia and South Carolina, who also are running very important statewide programs, some with public funding, some private, public-private partnerships. So I would ask them to introduce yourselves, please, gentlemen. And as you're doing that, tell us a little bit about the impetus for getting your organization started and where that funding comes from, just as a baseline.
Good afternoon. My name is Troy Lamel Stovall. I serve as the CEO of TEDCO, and I, first of all, thank you for having us, and I have to give my North Carolina bona fide. So even though I'm from Texas and I now live in Maryland, my wife is from Rocky Mount. She's a she is a very proud wolf pack. and she was just here a few weeks ago for the big game, and both our kids go to High Point, and so I've got all kinds of North Carolina bona fides. So TEDCO. TEDCO's been around for almost 30 years. We are the states. I like to talk about that we are a combination of economic development, ecosystem empowerment, and venture capital. On the venture capital side, we're about $250 million assets under management, approaching three. We are considered by PitchBook one of the top venture funds on the East Coast and one of the top in the country. We also have been recognized by the NASDAQ with the work that we're doing in funding in underserved communities. More than half of our dollars and half of our deals go to people of color, women, or rural founders. We do more than just write checks. We're writing checks from anywhere from $100,000 up to $2 million across three funds. And we do that whether those ideas come from someone's garage, someone's back of the napkin, universities, federal labs, doesn't matter. We do an extremely good job of taking those crazy, what I call those crazy ass ideas, in terms of something that can be invested into. And we do a good job of that. We have 4 pillars on the funding piece as I close. The state provides, part of our funding. We are not, I and no one at TEDCO is a state employee. We're a quasi-government. My friend here is a little different, so you hear a little bit different model here, there in Virginia. We're quasi-government, which means, I don't know what it means. Most days when I don't want to be part of the state, I'm part of the state. When I don't want to be part of the state, I never have figured it out in 5 years. But we provide whatever that entrepreneur needs, whether that's space, a lawyer, whatever they need for their, what we call their acceleration. We want to touch them in a way that accelerates their growth. And so one of the things as I close, we've talked about the notion of regionalization. I've had my friends from VIPC and from Pennsylvania talk to our board because I believe boundaries, I know there's some politicians in the room, and I get that you have this circle with those within the state, you want to be successful, but entrepreneurs don't see those boundaries. Entrepreneurs see what talent is and where opportunity is, and so we've got to think both how we think about both locally and regionally, and I'm sure we'll talk about that.
Wonderful, thank you.
Great, thanks, and I'm really glad to be here. I'm particularly glad to be here because for the first time in 20 plus years, I can actually say that I'm a proud alum of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, so go Heels. It's great to be here in the Triangle. I'm a native Virginian, but had that great experience there at Carolina. And VIPC, the Virginia Innovation Partnership Corporation, we actually are quite similar over time to TEDCO. We were actually started in the mid-'80s, in 1986. Back then, most of the whole idea was to try to figure out how Virginia could have a technology-based economy. We had a very traditional economy back then, agriculture, tobacco was our big product. We had tobacco and tourism and textiles. That's kind of what we did as a state. And so our state leadership back in the 80s started thinking of how we do this. They created us as a sort of hybrid quasi-governmental entity. We're not state employees, but we work and are funded by the state. And initially, the organization really focused on university commercialization and tech transfer. And by focus on, what I mean is that with the exception of probably Virginia Tech, which was really the only institution we had at that time that was doing R&D, we literally built the tech transfer operations at Virginia State Universities. And so over time, we've evolved. Interestingly enough, we only became part of the economic development landscape about 5 years ago, when the previous governor and the General Assembly decided to take what we had done over time, which we manage the state's venture capital fund. We do that both with some state appropriations, but also manage some of the federal money from like the SSBCI program that you all may have heard about. We still have that commercialization mission and have a whole program that's set up to fund and work with our universities by funding proof of concept projects, faculty EIR type opportunities, eminent scholar retention and recruitment so that we can make sure that we get the faculty we need who are doing tech transfer and commercialization, and that we can keep them from being poached by other universities, particularly in other states. We have a team that does tech development that actually comes under me now in the ecosystems world. And then my program is the entrepreneurial ecosystems portfolio, where we support through a variety of funding mechanisms, but also network development, the regional and industry-based players across the state that are working directly with our founders. We're really proud to have supported an organization like Riot, which is North Carolina-based, and I see Tom and Rachel and Jen here today from that team, working with them both in terms of some of the work around IoT, smart communities, but then helping bring some of their tech development, entrepreneurial development programs and lessons learned from North Carolina to what we're doing in Virginia. And then, we also are trying to do more cross-border work, obviously with our folks in Maryland and the district. But we have a lot of connectivity because Virginia is similar, we're a little bit smaller population-wise and a little bit smaller footprint-wise to North Carolina, but it takes about 10 hours to go from our eastern shore to the Cumberland Gap. And it's, we're like 5 or 6 states in one. And so we try to do, mix and mingle what we do, but we really are taking more of an opportunity to learn more from other people. So just, really appreciate the invitation to be here with NC Idea and to be with our fellow states.
Great, thank you. I love that sharing across borders that we're all doing in a very active way. Mitch.
Hey, I'm Mitch Smith. My North Carolina story is my dad's from North Carolina and went to Tar Heel High School in Dublin, North Carolina. So a peanut tobacco farmer. I grew up in South Carolina, still reside there, and I want to thank y'all for letting me be here. For 34 years, I did 4 tech startups. And never in my life did I ever think I'd work for a quasi-state agency, which I've done for the last 18 months, and it was a shell shock. But anyway, it's worked out. I'm in my role, which is a good thing. I get to do what I love to do. So basically, the South Carolina Research Authority, for those that don't know, is very similar to what we talked about here. The whole thing was started 40 years ago, ironically, because North Carolina and RTP were kicking our butts so bad that Governor Riley said, we need to figure out how we get tech transfer out of our universities. And that's how the whole thing started. But what was unique, I think one of our uniquenesses compared for those up here, is our legislature created what we call an industry partnership fund that allows businesses and individuals to contribute to our fund for a dollar-for-dollar tax credit. And that's what funds us. So what does that mean? In the last 10 years, we've given out over $50 million in grants, both in entrepreneurs and tech transfer. We've invested through our venture capital group called Launch Inc. I think right at $55 million. But to me, one of the biggest things that I think we don't talk about enough, and when I came into the organization 18 months ago and I saw this number, I was blown away. Little old state of South Carolina, we've had over $3 billion in follow-on funding. And you got to think the majority of that probably came outside of our state. So think of what that could do in North Carolina, in Georgia, in Maryland, Virginia. When you think about that follow-on funding that's coming out to invest in these companies, med techs, all these startups, that's what gets me eager. I spend half my time doing that. So I'm helping my companies we invest in increments generally $250,000 to $500,000. We just invested $1.3 million last week into 4 companies. But my job's not done. Those guys aren't just raising $300,000. They're raising $2 million and $3 million. So I'm sitting there helping them with deal flow. One of my team members is doing it right now. We're in a meeting right now with another capital firm trying to get their I think it's $2.5 million closed. So that's what I love about what we're doing. We are tech focused. That's all we can. That's our charters around technology. So you can think med tech, health tech, ag tech, things like that. Shout out to Wells Fargo Foundation for those of them in here that just gave our state $600,000 in ag tech grants. So we make the announcement with the governor and the head of Department of Agriculture at the state rotunda Monday. And we'll be giving away $14,000, $30,000 ag innovation and tech grants across the state. So we're excited to have partners like that come along beside us. Our money coupled with partners that entrust us to take care of their money. We're very thankful for that. And again, just excited to hear. And to your point about regional, Juan's back here from Innovate Charlotte. We constantly talk about the fact that, to your point, entrepreneurs don't care about lines. My wife, when I was doing my first startup, and she'd call me up crying because the debit card didn't work at Publix. You're worried about making cash, you're making payroll, and paying your taxes. Things like that don't matter. So how do we work together as a region and share programming and just help each other? So that's to the point. I think that's so well thought of. We've got to really look at how we take what we've all learned and do it better. I used to keep a sign above our office whenever you're walking out and say, how can we do better tomorrow than we did today? And I think that's why we're here, right? How do we do better? How do we take all these ideas we're gaining and take it back to our local areas and really do things better to the benefit of our entrepreneurs and our communities?
Wonderful, thank you. One theme that I've heard throughout the talks this morning and was kind of set up in discussion about what are the values that this ecosystem shares is really this sense of well, one, a bent for action, right? So we want to move, we want to get things done. Your organizations are 20, 30, and 40 years old, respectively, so we have a lot of ground to cover here in North Carolina to catch up. But that bent for action and that moving with a sense of urgency, the world is changing so quickly. Very uncertain times, but there's always an element of uncertainty, and technology is changing. So Troy, can I start with you and talk a little bit about where speed and urgency and kind of that bent for action factor into the work that you do?
No, thanks for that question. So I mentioned one of the tenets that we're working through at TEDCO is this notion of acceleration. Touching and acceleration. And we want to get smarter about the number of touches. And so we talk about when someone comes to TEDCO, we talk about coming into the TEDCO house. And we want to then assign them a virtual concierge to learn about who and what they are and where they are in their journey. And then we want to be able to introduce them to the rooms in the house that touch them at that point in the journey. But then as they continue on their journey, we want to be able to get predictive and be able to say, okay, we know at this point in 6 months, you're going to need to go to these rooms because that's going to accelerate your journey. Because what we want to get to the point is to be able to say, look, we know that if we can just get 5% of our companies, whether there's in tech or life science, that are going faster than the national average to get to $1 of revenue, $1 of recurring revenue, incremental valuations. If we can just get 5% to the earlier point, outside investors, and you're exactly right, I actually believe that the metric, and I know I got politicians here, the metric for those of us on this side, job creation actually is antithesis to being an investor. Because as an investor, I want you to grow, but not grow by adding people. It's actually interesting. And so a better metric for where I'm sitting is capital. Are we bringing capital to the state that but for would not come to the state? The average size of a TEDCO portfolio company is 2.5 people. 2.5 people. And yet, to your point, we've created more than, we actually just got a valuation before I came here. We have $6 billion unrealized value in our portfolio right now. And so the point, to answer your question, is we want to accelerate because we believe we can accelerate just 5%, there'll be an accretion to more than 5% of that outside capital saying, what the heck is going on in Maryland? That's what we want to be able to hear.
Fantastic. And picking up on that, that question of ROI and bringing capital in and really the kind of expanding view beyond job metrics to measure the impact of these programs. Can you talk, Conaway, a little bit about how you all think about your total performance of the program?
Yeah, I mean, we're constantly thinking about that, and that's something that we've had to, and I appreciate Troy for making that point, because I think our policymakers across the board, just in the U.S., not just in our respective states, that job creation is something that is really a focus, and we understand why. It's also, it makes it much easier to do sort of the smokestack chasing, big game hunting, economic development. So we try to navigate it through both. We do capture that, but we have added more of the capital attraction. The other thing we try to do is refocus the conversation around making, around founders first, right? What do the founders need? What do entrepreneurs need? And carrying that message. And then the other thing we try to do with that is to talk to the people who are on the ground working with founders. And I'm, not to pick on folks, but like Riot, right? We're right now, literally, they are helping us, stress test our metrics template that we use, our metrics frameworks. Does this make sense? How does this dovetail with what they're seeing with the companies that they work with the entrepreneurs that they're working with? Because we feel like, whether it's capital raised or in the case of some organizations, customers acquired, right? And having to expand that conversation. The other thing that presses our timeline is that Virginia, and we know, unlike the other 49 states, our governors can't run for re-election. And so we are constantly in a 4-year cycle. And on top of that, have a legislature that is either elected every 2 years or every 4 years. And so we've got this constant churn where we have to do things in a much more accelerated pace and try to balance that kind of responsiveness with the long-term trajectory that we know. Like, it's going to take 5 to 7 to 10 years to realize those returns for our venture capital fund. It's going to take 5 to 7 to 10 years for that faculty member's research in life sciences to turn into a product that gets through FDA FDA certification. So we've got to balance that, but we do, like, we just constantly live in this this state of that. And I will say what's interesting too about what keeps us sort of in check is that we're, I don't know if other states have experienced this. 3 of our last 5 governors have been venture capitalists or investment bankers. So we've had to,
Is
like,
that helpful?
it helps because we don't have to we don't have to go and explain what to do. The flip side is we have to do it faster,
Yeah.
and we have to try to do it better.
Yep.
I didn't think about temperatures, right? You're right.
And where does, just staying with you for a minute, where does connection with industry and understanding how industry sectors are growing and changing in the state come into play? You mentioned, the traditional economic development focus on big game hunting, and I think all of our programs have a chance to really change the narrative around how tech startups in particular can help to attract and secure some of those large partnerships.
Yeah, and actually, that is the word. It's about the partnerships. And so we, because I said 5 years ago, we were moved under the Economic Development Cabinet, Commerce and Trade Cabinet. So we sit right alongside the Virginia Economic Development Partnership, which is responsible for the big industry development and big industry recruitment. The other thing they do, though, is they have a huge research team, and that research team is constantly generating insights and analysis on emerging trends, industry analyses. And so we work with them to source information to understand where things are going, and we're also in constant communication with them at a person-to-person level, like CEO to CEO, VP to VP, even down to the mid-level staff, so that, like, when they're recruiting a big corporate, a lot of times those big corporates will have, like, a corporate venture fund, they're doing some strategic investing, or they're looking for smaller startups to see, looking at the ecosystem of, like, how can they get startups into their supply chain. So we're right there with them when they're doing this. We're often read into the NDAs. And so our thing is, like, we're taking more of Virginia's taking an all of the above strategy, not entrepreneurship or big corporates, but corporations and startups together, and really focusing around those industries where we have a right to win because of the nature of our economy and our state.
Great, fantastic. Mitch, do you want to pick up on that and talk about how you work with other economic development organizations in South Carolina and the region?
Yeah, so we really do. I mean, we work alongside economic development. It's interesting. Economic development, what I call traditional, have no understanding of what we do. So they call us up and say, hey, can you help us? We've got a battery plant coming. We don't know what to do. It's that technology piece that kind of gets them. So we do work alongside economic development. And also some of the cities, of course, we work closely with some of the larger cities in helping them. One of the things that we do that's kind of unique, and we actually offer what's called demo grants. We have a team that goes around the state meeting with businesses like the BMWs, the Michelins, the Volvos, the Mercedes, our bigger businesses, and trying to engage where their needs are and finding out would they be willing to test out an innovation that one of our 220 companies has created. And we'll actually fund the demo grant to $50,000, but we do require the company to put up some money. Generally, we like a match, so generally it could be $50,000 BMW, $50,000 us, or whatever. And we bring that in, and then we actually work along with that company, with the big company, say BMW, and we try to ensure their success in that product, because now they get hopefully a 3-year contract. A perfect example. A company we just recently brought, to give you an idea, somebody asked me earlier our mix. We have 220 members currently. We call them members or clients. Over 80% of those we've given a grant to, of at least $25,000 to $50,000 to maybe $75,000. And of that group, 72 we've invested capital in. So it gives you a breakdown. We have a company that just came to us, SharpView in Chapin, South Carolina. Creates a little AI mobile platform for, like, construction. You see the blinking light things like in parking lots and stuff. They have a very unique one. And Mungo Homes came to us and said, hey, we want to do a pilot with SharpView. We'll put up $50,000, you put up $50,000. We're like, perfect, let's do it. They had a need. People were stealing stuff off their construction yards, so they really wanted to do it. Interesting. It's a $100,000 grant. Guess what contract value of the first contract is? $2.2 million recurring revenue off of one client. That's where demo grants can really play for these companies in their startup. And we're really trying to really take apart and get in our economic development to help us make those connections when they hear somebody's got a need. maybe we've got a startup company in our portfolio that's created that solution we can bring in and fund that pilot project.
I love that model. I hope somebody on the team was taking notes. We may be stealing that. That's a
That's the
terrific
great
model.
thing. We've talked about this in our meeting. I would hope Virginia, Maryland, South Carolina, Georgia, all of us would come together as a region and share these ideas and work together, because the stronger we get, the more our companies don't feel the need to go to Austin, New York, San Francisco.
Absolutely.
They stay here.
Yes.
That's what we want to do. We want to keep them here. I was a farmer before I got into technology. And I did have to go to Columbia. And Columbia's not much, but I did have to move closer to the city to launch my company because I needed employees. But with today, you don't need that anymore. You don't need that anymore. And so we've got to show our entrepreneurs they can build it where they are.
Yes, and that's a great transition. I wanted to pivot to talk a little bit more about the regional aspect of our work. We've heard a lot today already about the strength of RTP, the Triangle as a region in North Carolina. The stats are undeniable about what we've been able to create in the state, in this central part of the state over the last 50 to 75 years. And yet, we have incredible resources and assets in every region across North Carolina. That's why NCInnovation is really dedicated to putting people on the ground and looking at our regional institutions broadly as a statewide technology platform. So from Charlotte to Cullowhee to the Piedmont Triad, we're giving grants to all sorts of technologies and supporting them where they are. That's part of our mission, and we think it's the right thing to do for North Carolina. Can you talk a little bit about how, especially since you've had long runways in your organizations, how you see this and deal with this balance between, feeding the traditional generators of most of that technology activity, and then really going now where that spread is to make sure that prosperity is much more shared?
Yeah, that could be a whole conference just on that one subject. For us, obviously, a couple of things, I guess. One is we see the connective tissue to our friends in Virginia and in D.C., the DMV, as it's called. And we actually have a new term that we call now the D squared MV, Delaware, D.C. We were proud to get some of the first SSBCI technical assistance dollars. We got $10 million. And the reason we got it is because we thought differently about technical assistance. We actually went to them and said, we want to do stuff beyond our normal region of Maryland and look at the region, truly. Because when people say region, they normally mean a region within a state. When we said region, no, we meant we're going to go work with the University of Delaware. We meant we're going to work with Howard University. We meant we're going to go work with George Mason. And that's exactly what we've done. We just launched this effort called Bridge that looks at that regional. And one of the efforts in that bridge is one of the things I think is important for any small business is a back office. We just launched a back office in a box. So we went and got best-in-class IT, HR, legal, accounting, put it in a box, and all of our entrepreneurs in Delaware, in D.C., Maryland, Virginia will have access to this box. Because the point is, you can't, so if we can, again, back to acceleration, if all of a sudden the back office in those states can only spend $1 where they would have spent $15, guess what those other $14 are going to go to? Accelerating their growth. And so the whole point is, how do we accelerate the growth? Because you're right. Look, right now, since I've been there, 5 years, we've lost, I think even my language needs to change. We've had 5 companies that we've invested in move to North Carolina because they need to do manufacturing. We don't have a good manufacturing base around pharma and life sciences that you guys have here. We got to rethink even that conversation. We didn't lose them in Maryland. We need to talk about how we gained along the East Coast, about how do we rethink the metrics of how we've created that ecosystem across our states.
Yes.
And I think for us, what it's required us to do is both look internally and externally as an organization and rely on leveraging networks, right? And to turn relationships into networks instead of having these, one-off, two-off, really build. And what we've done on the, sort of supporting regions across the state as well is to not try to cookie-cutter solutions, right? And I think that's been the biggest change just for us, but also changing the conversation of like, hey, look, we're never going to have the same thing in every region, but every region can have its own version of prosperity. And I think what we've done in a couple ways. One, and we think this is somewhat unique across the country. We've seen this at maybe like our friends at Launch Tennessee, but we built in my team, we built a network of over a dozen entrepreneur support organizations, accelerators, incubators that are based out in the regions of the state, from one end to the other, all around. And we work with them, we resource them financially on a continuous basis. We invest in their companies, whether it's non-equity, non-dilutive grants and equity. And we really help them tap into each other's networks. And so we've actually encouraged those organizations, we bring them together at least once a year in person. We meet with them quarterly. They're starting to work together and doing things on their own now, right? And that's stitching together this entire robust network of support. We also are working with our partners in local and regional economic development. So helping those cities and counties and towns understand how they can support founders and startups in their communities as well. And so really, again, turning those relationships into actual networks that are long-lasting and that are robust. And we're doing the same thing at the university level as well, because our universities, unlike in North Carolina, we don't have a system. So our university, so we've got 6 R1 institutions, two R2 institutions, and they're literally all over the map, and they don't match our major metro areas. So that's what we have to create those networks around there as well, to have those university folks. And now we're going to bring those folks together with our accelerators and incubators as well. And again, continue to build out these networks so that founders can be supported wherever they are, and we can start to generate the ROI that our policymakers and others will understand and support.
Just filling in all those spaces. I love that. Mitch?
Yeah, you've heard about a lot of things I think we've done right at SCRA and Launch. One of the things I think we haven't done right, and we're correcting course this year. If you look at primarily when you look at our grants and where we primarily operate, and we do have offices in Greenville, Columbia, Charleston. Kind of our prior thought was we don't need to invest in the ecosystems. That's what the state does, or something else does. Wells Fargo does, or whatever. And that was not a good idea, because if you think about it, what we do, we sit above the ecosystem. So we're needing the pipeline, right? The pipeline of companies coming through our ecosystems to come up so we can do our grants and investment. So this year with new leadership, we've decided to put $5 million into the ecosystems of South Carolina. And we're going to do that across the state. We are going to put, if you take the 3 core cities, Columbia, Charleston, Greenville, they will get half collectively. All of our, we call them rural. We got to change that word. I hate that word. We got to change that. We need to come up with small sector or whatever. But we're going to invest the same amount in our smaller areas. So hopefully that'll allow some of that, to your point. We can start, because, hey, you can't tell me there's not a founder in Abbeville, South Carolina, or some small town like Dublin, North Carolina, where my dad was from. They're there.
Right.
They just don't have the resources to bring it. They know an idea, they can't ideate it, and they can't grow it. And that's where we realize we've got to move the money around the state. And so that's what we're doing. And we have basically what I call 9 people on the ground all the time. And we basically said, hey, you shouldn't be at the office too much this week. You need to be out in all these little rural areas and spend more time. And that's what we're doing. So we're really doing a lot of education of economic development. City councils don't understand this. County councils don't understand this. So we're having to educate what that means. So we're spending a lot of time doing that.
I like less dense.
What's that? Less dense?
Less dense.
Dense. Having the people on the ground really matters. The NCInnovation team is mostly here today. And it just getting out into those communities, what we're finding is that there's always more room to help with the ecosystem. Listening first and figuring out where those gaps are and what's needed, and being additive with a service mindset is really helping us all. We are coming up on time, so we'll end with a quick round of give us your F word.
My F word?
Give us your F word.
Mine was, I'll go first. Mine was freedom. That's what I enjoyed about being an entrepreneur.
Freedom.
Was freedom. My wife homeschooled. We did a lot of homeschooling, and I did a lot of business in an RV, traveling around the country. So I love, to me, it was the freedom I got to do, to have.
Fantastic.
Now I don't have it anymore. But my kids are gone. I'm an empty nester, so I now have more freedom, I guess, if I think of it that way.
Yeah, I guess mine would be friendships. I'm an extremely
Nice.
extroverted person, and so I try to get to know everybody. As my son will tell people, my dad knows everybody everywhere. I try to get to know people. That drives me. That's how I like to do business in this space, and try to have those real authentic connections with people that we work with, and that we do things with, and that we improve the lives of our state and communities with.
So it's funny you're asking me this. About 6 months ago, my board, I have a 19-person board, which is a whole nother conversation. And then I got a wife, so I got 20 bosses. I got 20 bosses in my life. And they asked me what they could do to help me, and I said, I want to have more fun. They said, Troy, really, what you want? I said, I want to have more fun.
Good for
Because if
you.
we work this hard, people, if we work this hard, you better have some fun with it. That's what I believe.
Fantastic. So mine is first, North Carolina, first public higher education system in the country, first in flight. We should be first in innovation entrepreneurship, alongside, of course, our first in region partners. No competition here. And can you join me in thanking? Absolutely. Can we thank the panel?